Hi, my name is Alessandro Cangelosi and this is another tutorial coming from cgcookie.com. In this tutorial we'll talk about something we saw before on cgcookie, and in the past we saw a written tutorial about the creation of fragments coming from a mesh and how to animate the dynamic for this stuffs. And so we start to work on some tutorial, a lineup of tutorial talking about the fragmentation and explosion stuffs for some simple objects, and then we move on bigger stuffs. We'll start talking about how we can fragments a mesh, and then we'll talk about how we can use the dynamic to animate this part. There are many ways to create fragmentation coming from a mesh. We know that we can use maybe for a very simple effects particle array, but we have not so good control over the pieces of the mesh, and we have a big problem coming from the collision between the pieces and the other mesh, because the dynamic comes from the center of the particle, and it takes no the particle system have no idea about the fragment mesh, so there's no collision between the fragment and the other mesh in the scene. So we spend no time to talk about how we can use particle array to create the fragments, but maybe we can use in another part of this tutorial, maybe next month, how to use particles to create debris, and how to add more realism and more detail. Maybe in the future we can talk also about how we can use some particle stuffs like fume effects or maybe Krakatoa to enhance this kind of sheen, and maybe we can see a more way to create the stuffs, this kind of effects. For this part of the tutorial, we'll talk about how to create manually the fragment coming from the mesh. Maybe we can add the use of some simple script that you can find over the web. And in future parts we'll talk about how to use maybe Refire or thinking particles to create the same stuffs. Okay, let's start creating the first example. So I remove the grid in the viewport using the G key to see better the mesh, and I go in the customize menu, unit setup, and I check that the display unit scale is set to metric and centimeters. That's very important because we have to work on the dynamic stuffs, and we need to have all the physical properties in the right way to achieve the better result. Okay, now I can create a simple plane where our mesh can collide, and we use Reactor as dynamic system. So the plane at the base of our environment must be a volumetric mesh, a 3D mesh. So I can use the plane, but I have to use a box like this. So we can choose 2 meters for the length and 2 meters for the width, and 10 centimeters for the height. Okay, we have the base for our collision, and now I can create, for example, a sphere, and I can put the sphere upper in the sheen, and we can start to create the pieces. To create the fragments manually, we use the ProCutter feature coming in 3ds Max. And for this tutorial, we'll use 3ds Max 2010, as you can see. And this is a way to create the pieces, but you can use also the Boolean feature or the ProBoolean feature, using maybe not a plane to cut the mesh, but a three-dimensional mesh to make the Boolean. Okay, I save the scene so we have a base to work on, and I go in the right directory. Sorry. Okay, and I name it 3ds Max Fragmentation. Okay, and before I write tutorial. Okay, we are ready to start with the other feature. So let's see how we can create the first cut in the mesh. And to create a cut, we have to use the line spline to create the first line that will be the cutter for the mesh, like this one. So we'd like to split the mesh there using this line as a cutter. So to create the cutter, I go in the modifiers and I select the extrude, so we can create as you can see the cutter mesh, and I move it because we have to intersect the mesh, and I can also rotate it a little to have a less precise shape for the cutter. And I use the edges faces, and I make more segments because I like to use a noise to have a distortion over the cutter. So now I can select the noise modifier. We can go at the full screen with this part. Okay, and I set fractal to on, and I start to change the value for the X, Y, and Z. And we can change the scale like this one. Okay, and we are ready to start with the first cut. We can select the line that will be the cutter, and we can go in the compound objects. We select ProCutter, and we press pick stock objects that will be the mesh that we'd like to split. I select it, and you can see that we have the cutted mesh. Now I select again pick stock, and I go in the select way, and I go in the edit, clone, I make a copy of this one, I go in the modify, and I select stock outside, and I select stock inside, so I have the other piece of the mesh. You can use, for example, more spline in the same way. So you can create the sphere, you can create all the cutter, and you can select the sphere, select ProCutter as compound objects, and then you can select all the cutter. So with a multi-selection, and you can break the mesh just using one time the ProCutter. But I'd like to show you how you can decide step by step how to create the breaking piece. So I can save again the scene, and we are ready to go move forward to create other parts for the mesh. So we can, for example, create a cutter there, and I create another spline like this one. Okay, I go again in the modifiers, extrude, and we have the spline, so I can make it with a less amount. I use more segments. I can select again the noise, and we can use a very high value for the cutter, and we can maybe change also the rotation, like this one and this one and this one, just to have a less precise cutting. So we go again in the compound objects, we select again ProCutter, and we select Pick Stock, and we select this part, and you can see that we have removed a part of the mesh. I select again Peak, I go in the select mode, edit, clone, I make a copy, I go in the modify, I remove stock outside, and I select stock inside, so we can change the color for this piece. Okay, and we can remove the edges face. So you can see that we are splitting the mesh in various parts, and again we can split this one, and I can create another spline like this one, and we go in the extrude, okay, and we have for sure to move there, and we can make more segments, and I select again noise, fractal, and I start to change this one. Okay, we are ready to make another cut, and I go in the compound objects, ProCutter, Pick Stock Objects, and I select this one, and you can see that we have splitted again the mesh, and I select Peak, I go in the select mode, edit, clone, copy, and I select the select stock outside and select stock inside, so we have another piece of the mesh. And now I'd like to make maybe 2 breaks there, and I select line like this one, okay, and I go in the extrude as modifier, and let's see to move it, okay, like this, and now I make a copy, okay, I select noise, I change like always the various parameters to be sure that we can create a very interesting cutter. So I go again in the compound, select ProCutter, Pick Stock Objects, and we select this one, then I select Peak, I go in the select mode, edit, clone, I copy, modify, I remove the stock outside, and I select stock inside, so I can change again the colors for this part. And now I select this mesh, and I select noise, fractal, and I change the parameters. And now I go in the ProCutter, Pick Stock Objects, and I select this one, I select Peak, I go in the select mode, edit, clone, I make a copy, I can go in the modify, select the stock outside and select the stock inside, and I change again the color of the mesh. So let's check the mesh. You can see that we have some breaks done. Maybe we can break this part and we can stay with this big part. We can remain with this part. So let's go in the front viewport, the left one, sorry, but we can use also the front one, and I can, okay, and we use the extrude, and we move this one, and I rotate it to have a no precise cutter, and I select noise as modifier, fractal, and I use a lot of fractalization for this cutter. Then I go in the compound objects, pro cutter, pick stock objects, and we created another piece. Then I go in the clone, I copy it, I remove stock outside and select stock inside. Okay, so for the moment we have all the parts for our breaking, and I can save the scene, and we are ready to prepare the mesh for the dynamic system. Okay, the first thing you can see is that we have a lot of problems around the face, and that's why we have not a smooth for the moment for this mesh. So we can make an example using just a piece of the mesh. So I select this one, I go in the tools, and you can select isolate selection, or you can use the Alt Q and on the keyboard, and we have this part of the mesh, and I'd like to solve this visible edge problem. So I select this one and I convert it to editable poly, and now I go in the modifiers and I select smooth, and you can see that now we see all the face because we have no smoothing between the faces, and I select auto smooth, and we have a good mesh. So let's see how it works, and I see piece. I give a material, and we see that we have the same material there, and we can see how it works if I use a multi-sub objects, and we can select, for example, this one, and you can see actually that we have the same material for this mesh, but we can change it manually, or we can change it using other ways, and for the moment it's not important. Maybe we can see how to solve this problem in another part for the tutorial. I prefer to check how to create the fragmentation, how to break the mesh, and then how to work on the dynamic system to animate it, and then we can move forward on next part of the tutorial. So let's go out of the isolation selection, and we can select all the other mesh. So I can go in the edit, select invert, and I can deselect the box using the Alt key and the mouse button. Okay, let's convert it to editable poly, and let's use a smooth modifier. Okay, like before, and we select auto smooth. So we have all the mesh with the right smoothing group. For sure you can use more phases at the beginning of the cutting for the original mesh, so you can be sure that your mesh will be more precise, but for our purpose it can be okay for the moment. So now we have the piece, and we can try to simulate how to break this one using the speed of the falling animation. So we can make falling the sphere over the box, and the acceleration and the collision with the box will break the mesh. Or for example, we can animate the breaking event using another mesh that bounce over the fragmented mesh. So let's save the scene, and let's start working with the reactor stuffs. So to work with the reactor, we have to go in the helpers submenu, and we go in the right reactor area, and we have to create a rigid body collection, because all the mesh will be rigid body, because that it can collide between each other. And we click on add, and we select all the mesh, so all the pieces and the box. Select OK, and now we have to create the fracture mesh, and so we select fracture, we create it, we go in the modify, and we select add, and we select all the line pieces coming from the sphere, the original sphere, and you can see that now we have the fragmented mesh. We have a lot of interesting stuff there, but for the moment you can see that we have the beacon event set to velocity. So when the velocity of the fractal objects will be 100 centimeters, it will be break. But we can choose also to select the impulse, so the force that will be over the mesh will break the mesh. Okay, I can save again to be sure that if we have some problems we can continue our work. And now we are ready to set the reactor world. So we have to go in the utilities, and we have to select all the pieces, because we have to set the mass of the mesh. So I go in the utilities and I select reactor, and we have the reactor menu, and I go in the properties and I set for the mass, for example, 15. And then we have to go in the avoc1 world, and we have to set some physical parameters. And let's change the gravity for the zeta axis, and let's write minus 900 centimeters. That's it's very near the real Earth gravitational acceleration. And we have to set towards scale, and we have the units 1 meters will be equal to this number in 3ds max, and we are using the real world scale, so 1 meters will be 100 centimeters in 3ds max. And we have to change the collision tolerance to be more precise, because using something around 4 centimeters, we are saying that when a mesh will be at 4 centimeters from another mesh, there will be the collision, and it is not so precise. So let's try to start using 1 centimeters for the collision, but we can move forward and use less tolerance to have a very realistic effects. Then we can go in the preview and animation, and we have the start frame and end frame. And we can set, for example, we can for the moment we can use substeps 10, that is how many deep calculation will be made for every single frame. So for a single frame we have 10 times the calculation to be very precise for the dynamic simulation. If we have some kind of problems like interpretation between the mesh or something else, we can try to use more sub-steps to increase the realism and the quality of the dynamic simulation. And for the moment we are ready, and we can use two ways to see the dynamic simulation. We can create the animation and see it in the machine, and we can use the OpenGL preview coming from Reactor. So before I try to use the real-time preview, I save the scene and I'm ready to use the real-time previewer. Okay, to use the real-time preview, we have to click on preview in view in window. The first step that has been done from Reactor is to analyze the world, the dynamic world of all the meshes, so we can be sure that we have no problems inside the scene. and you can see that the reactor messages is analyzed complete, so there's no problem inside our machine. And this is the Reactor real-time preview. You have to remember that Reactor is based on the Avoc dynamic engine, and Avoc comes from the video game world, so it's normal to have a kind of real-time preview for an engine like that. Maybe it is less precise than other kind of dynamic system, but it is very, very, very fast. So we can move and check the machine around using the left mouse button. So I can press it and move the mouse, and I can orbit the machine. And to see the simulation, as you can see there, you have to press the P key over the keyboard. So I press the P key, and we see that we have the real-time simulation and the breaking events of the various parts, and we have also the time to see how many frames we need to make the simulation. And a very interesting way is that we can use also the middle mouse button to make the zoom inside the machine, is that you can work with the dynamic system in real time and all the dynamic mesh. So for example, I can move the mouse pointer over a mesh. I can press the right mouse button and move the mesh, and we can move it using the dynamic system in real time, and you can see that I can use it. So you see that's everything in real time, and I can make what I'd like with this mesh, and this is real for every feature coming from a Reactor. So you can be sure that it's not so precise, because you can see that I can, for example, if I move to match the mesh, you can see that it's not so stable. But it is interesting to have the possibility to work in real time with the mesh to understand if all the dynamic parameters we used are right or not. Okay, that's now we are sure that it works, and we can reset, and we can move near, and we can again press the P, and we can see in real time the fragmentation. So let's close the preview, and for the moment we have no animation because we saw just the preview. To create the animation, we have to click on the create animation, and we can use the update viewports. So during the calculation we can see the animation inside 3ds Max in the viewport. So I select update viewports and I click on create. Reactor is asking if we are sure to create the animation, because it will be, if we have previous animation, it will be written again over, and we can lose everything. So I say yes, okay, and as you can see, it is very, very fast. And now we have the animation of the fragmentation, and we can move near to see if it was precise or not, and it seems that it was very good. But if we have problems like some mesh that go inside, maybe like this one, inside other mesh, to be sure to have the best result, you can remove the grid pressing the G key, and you can use more sub-steps. It will be slower, but it will be more precise. And let's try using 20 sub-steps. I press again create animation, and it is done. But for the moment you can see that we have a new problem that we had no before, and we have problem there and there. So in these cases, maybe it's better or to use more sub-steps, or maybe to use the lowest that will be that it was not so bad. Let's try with 50. Now it starts to be slower, and actually we have a problem just for these pieces, and it depends also on the amount of faces that are in the mesh, and also the collision tolerance and the speed of the simulation. And the good part is that this is very simple and very fast to prepare it, and we can use now, for example, particle system to create debris or maybe dust effects. And it's interesting also that we can use, for example, particle array to create some little debris, mesh debris coming from one pieces or more. And the other interesting way is that, as you can see, we can use it in Reactor with rigid body collision, but also with cloud simulation and everything else. And we saw how to create the pieces manually. We saw how to make the first setup coming from Reactor in a very simple way. And we saw how to break a mesh using a dynamic force like the gravity inside the world. So the gravity will be the force that make the sphere falls, and when the sphere will collide, we have the acceleration for the pieces, the fragmented pieces, and then we have the break-on. Okay, for this part, it's everything. Now we can test the last part of this tutorial, and it will be how to, I select all the pieces, how to create a break-on using a collision mesh. So I select all the mesh and I select the, it's better to make it there, and I select all the pieces and I move it over the box, and we can go again back to 10 sub-steps, and let's see a preview. As you can see, the sphere will just move and we have no breaking events, but we can use another mesh. So I create maybe a box, and we can say that maybe there, and we can say to the rigid body collection that now we have another mesh, the box 2, and we can select the box, go in the reactor, in the properties, and we can set that the mass is 25, and we can try to pick the sphere, maybe, or maybe we can animate it by hand. Let's see if we are lucky. Let's press the P. Yes. So for example, you can see if I create the animation that the mesh can be forced to break starting from the collision with another mesh. That's a way to create the fragments. Or for example, we can use another way that will be animating this mesh by hand, and let's see if it's okay or not, but it's better to create another mesh there to be sure that the sphere cannot go another part of the scene. So I go in the modify and I add the box 3, and now we can move there and we can create a key at 0 frames, and we can say that there at the 16 the mesh will be there, so we have this animation. Okay, so I press the auto key and let's go in the Reactor panel, and we have to say that this mesh is animated and must be used without the dynamic animation. So we select the mesh, we go in the properties, and we select unyielding. Now our Reactor knows that this mesh is animated by hand. I can move again in the preview and animation panel, and I go in the preview, I press the P key, and you can see that we have the breaking. For sure it is very fast, so we have some kind of problems for the collision between the pieces and this mesh that has not so much phase, but it's not so important for this tutorial. It's important to see that a mesh can be split using an animated mesh that can be not visible in the rendering, for example. So let's create the animation. Okay, and we have the breaking. So now we, for example, hide this one and hide this one, and we have the breaking, and the breaking will be done by a force. In this example, you can see that we have something like an explosion, and it's very interesting. So for this part of the tutorial, it will be over, and we saw how to break manually the mesh. We saw how to use some ways in Reactor to break, to create the dynamic animation. And in the next part of the tutorial, we'll start to work with particles, and we'll see how to create more realistic fragmentation and more complex effects, and how to use, for example, this feature inside a realistic scene, like how to break a building or something like that. For the moment, that's all, and I hope to see you again on CG Cookie, and I'd like to say thank you. Bye.